You know, Christmas is supposed to be a sumptuous feast that everyone eats together. Moderation is fine, but I feel sorry for my son. You may not know this, but when it's Christmas, I think chicken should be more fitting.
Holly, my mother-in-law in a mocking voice, refused to eat the meal I had prepared for her. Immediately thereafter, my husband got up from his seat and took away the meal in front of my mother-in-law.
I'm cutting off my ties with you. What?
My husband announced shortly, leaving my mother-in-law in a daze. We left my parents-in-law's house. I'm Nicole, 30 years old, and I work in an office at a company. My husband Barry is 31 years old and works for another company. We have known each other since we were children. Barry's father is a corporate executive, and his mother is a housewife, but when he was a child, his mother was often away from home for certain reasons, so we often took care of him at home. Because of this, Barry was well liked by my parents before we started dating, and Barry was also very fond of my parents. We were together all the time, and although there were times when we both went out with different people, we naturally started dating and got married. People around us were very excited about our marriage.
I knew you two would get married.
We were embarrassed, but happy about the fact that we were married. However, my mother-in-law was the only one who was opposed to our marriage. The reason was that I had grown up without a mother, and also because Barry was supposed to be matched with a young lady who knew my mother-in-law. It was my mother-in-law's idea to marry him off, but Barry and my father-in-law ignored it. My mother-in-law directed her anger at me. My mother passed away due to illness when I was in junior high school. But then, my mother-in-law looked at my family this way.
Women raised by a single parent are more likely to cheat on their husbands. They will not be able to do the housework and child-rearing properly that their mothers should have taught them.
And other such groundless things she had said to me while hiding behind Barry and my father-in-law. My mother-in-law's family had been landowners for a long time, and the young lady that she wanted Barry to marry came from a family with a good background. She said that it would be better for Barry to marry her than me, who grew up in a single-parent household. It was for Barry's own good, she said, and treated me like an obstacle. At first,
why don't you think about marrying Nicole after you meet the young lady I know? There's no need to be so hasty.
She casually expressed her objection, but Barry did not seem to listen to her, so she began to speak more and more forcefully.
Why are you marrying a girl with a single parent? Your mother found you a wonderful lady.
Barry's mother said to him right in front of me. Barry was furious.
I'm not interested in that woman, and I don't care if Nicole has only one parent, or if she's an orphan, or if she had both parents. Don't ever say that crap again.
Since she got told off by him forcefully, she hid away from him, but still continued to repeatedly harass me.
You need to get off your butt and leave Barry. If you love Barry, then get out of his sight so he can be happy.
She kept saying, happiness is not something to be decided by the parents. You say I can't do my chores because I was raised by a single parent, but I was the one who took care of the house while my father was at work, so don't worry. I countered my mother-in-law's words, but the fact that she called and even went as far as to belittle my father and tell me to leave Barry, I decided to discuss this with him. As a result, we had no choice but to stay strong until the wedding, but after that, we would keep our distance from his family, except for weddings and funerals. I especially won't have anything to do with my mother-in-law. We were both settled in our jobs, and we got married when I was 25. For the next 5 years, as Barry had said, except for the occasional visit from my father-in-law, we had very little contact with them. We had a good relationship as a couple, and 1 year before Christmas, I was pregnant with our first child. We were both wondering whether or not we should share it with my in-laws. I received a letter from my mother-in-law apologizing to me.
At the time, I was so sad that Barry was no longer in my care that I took it out on you. I couldn't apologize right away because I didn't know how I would look to you. I am so sorry.
I was quite surprised at what my mother-in-law had written, but if she were really sorry for what she had done, I would tell Barry about it. And then, on Christmas Eve, we would decide to go to my in-laws' house and tell them about the pregnancy.
I am still not sure if I can trust everything in her letter, but we'll have to tell them about the baby eventually. We'll see how things go this Christmas.
Barry was being cautious about improving his relationship with his parents. Then, on Christmas Eve, when we arrived at my in-laws' house, my mother-in-law greeted us with a smile. She was the first to apologize to me.
I'm so sorry for what happened. I've been thinking about it and regretting it for the past few years. So it was really nice to see you again like this.
I was relieved to hear my mother-in-law's words and stepped into my in-laws' house as I was welcomed. That day, I spent Christmas Eve talking with my in-laws for the first time in a long time. The next day, however, an incident occurred. I was going to tell them about my pregnancy at a dinner party scheduled for Christmas Day, but I was asked by my mother-in-law,
Nicole, it's been a while. Can you help me cook?
She said, so I helped her. Although it's a dinner party, it was just my parents-in-law, my husband, and I enjoying a little luxury food and celebrating Christmas. However, my mother-in-law did not help me with the cooking. She left it to me because she said she's in a great hurry to go shopping and prepare for the dinner party. The menu had not even been decided yet, and it was only after 4 p.m. when she told me about it. I felt uncomfortable about it, but when I went to the supermarket, I found some large tacos which were on display, so I bought those. In fact, Barry and I both have fond childhood memories of eating tacos. When Barry would eat at our house, my mother would make these. It's fun and tasty when we all cook and eat together. She'd say, Barry would always remember this, even as an adult.
Nicole's mother was always very attentive, so I really enjoyed eating at your house because she took care of me when I ate alone. I was able to forget how lonely I was,
he told me, and I responded. It was really fun to eat tacos together, wasn't it? Thinking back on it now, it was also easy because all we had to do was prepare the ingredients. I laughed. And then the dinner party started, and I had just laid out the ingredients for the tacos on the table. My mother-in-law, who was watching me, opened her mouth and said,
Oh, you're serving tacos on Christmas?
Yes. Well, you told me about what I was going to cook a little late. I can't cook anything elaborate. And besides, in our family, tacos hold a special meaning for us. Is that bad?
You know, Christmas is supposed to be a big feast for everyone. Moderation is good, but this is not good for Barry. You may not know this, but Christmas is all about chicken.
I couldn't hide my surprise at these words, and I looked at my mother-in-law's face. She was grinning and making fun of me. Then, Barry stood up and took my hand.
Let's go home. I'm cutting off ties with her. What?
Barry's words were followed by my mother-in-law and my voice. And then, my father-in-law Calvin spoke up.
Holly, weren't you trying to improve your relationship with Nicole?
In response to this question from my father-in-law, my mother-in-law stared at me with a serious look on her face. She began to answer in a voice that sounded as if she was really worried about Barry.
I was going to, but this isn't going to work. You brainwashed Barry, and you're not fit to be our daughter-in-law after all. I have apologized to you, and you're still using Barry to do hurtful things to me.
What? My mother-in-law's comment confused not only me, but also Barry and my father-in-law. According to my mother-in-law, she really wanted to improve her relationship with me. But she decided that it was impossible. And then, it turns out that the lady she tried to match with Barry before also got married, But because of the woman's infidelity, she got divorced and is looking for a new husband. So my mother-in-law decided to bring it up to Barry again. So she sent me a letter of apology to have him come to see her at Christmas. I later heard that while I was out shopping, my mother-in-law had casually told Barry about it. At this point, Barry was already angry with his mother. However, because of the matter of our future child, and since I was out shopping for food, they decided to discuss things after the dinner party was over.
You, why are you pushing such a woman to Barry? He already has Nicole. Nicole would never cheat on him, and she's a much nicer girl.
The young lady comes from a good family. She and Barry will get along just fine as divorced couples.
I'm sure the divorce was caused by an affair, right?
You are a man. You can forgive a fling or two, can't you? You forgave me too.
The in-laws began to argue. When my mother-in-law said those last words, it was as if time froze. My mother-in-law had an affair once when Barry and I were still children. Barry was in our house often because my mother-in-law was having an affair and was always away. My in-laws were on the verge of divorce once at this time. My mother-in-law apologized and Barry was still very young. My father-in-law was reluctant to rebuild the relationship. My father-in-law was reluctant to reestablish it. My father-in-law, though quiet, became furious.
You think I forgave you easily for what you did to me back then? Are you saying that you have no problem with your son going through the same thing I went through?
As expected, my mother-in-law was choking on her own foolish words. Holly, you have the nerve to say that I'm prone to cheating on my husband and to leave Barry because of your selfish prejudice of me being raised by a single parent, didn't you? You're from a good family, so why did you have an affair? Don't you think something's wrong with your attitude? Hearing my words, my mother-in-law became even more furious, saying I didn't know what I was talking about. And just when the mood of the place was getting bad, Barry spoke up.
Did you ever think about how that must have felt at that moment? Or if I, who was only your child then, was feeling so lonely? You didn't think about all that, did you? At least, I would never marry a woman who would cheat on me, and I have no intention of leaving Nicole in the first place. I don't want to breathe the same air in this house with a woman like you. We are leaving.
Barry's face was full of anger and contempt. I followed him, unable to speak. My mother-in-law tried to keep Barry back, but my father-in-law would have none of it. From inside the in-laws' house, I could hear my mother-in-law frantically apologizing to my father-in-law. When we got home,
I wish I could just tell Dad about the baby. But if he and Mom are going to be together, I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want Nicole involved either. I'm sorry you had to go through all this because of my parents.
Barry lowered his head. You didn't do anything wrong, and you were just their child. You are innocent. I couldn't do anything but reply. Later that evening, as we were relaxing at home, Barry received a call from his mother. Barry seems to be arguing with her. I could tell from the way Barry was acting that the discussion between the in-laws was not going to end well for my mother-in-law. I sensed from Barry's behavior that the discussion between his parents had ended badly for his mother.
My parents are getting a divorce. My dad was going to divorce her when I came of age, but he has been holding out until we got married so he wouldn't have to worry about us.
Barry ended the call with a terribly tired look on his face and told me that his parents were divorcing. My mother-in-law called Barry for my father-in-law, who had told her he was getting a divorce. She tried to have Barry to convince his father to reconsider, and also to make amends with Barry's supposed marriage partner, still going on with her selfish way of thinking. Naturally, Barry rejected this, and even told his mother that he would refuse to have any further contact with her. He also said that he was considering legal action depending on the situation. I was appalled at my mother-in-law's brazenness. Barry's condition, rather than mentioning it, I'm quite concerned about his and my father-in-law's mental state, and I just hope that they would be able to separate themselves from my mother-in-law as soon as possible. A few days later, we received a call from my father-in-law. We invited him to our house and had a discussion about the future. According to my father-in-law, his divorce from my mother-in-law was final, and that she was going back to her hometown for the time being. However, it was discovered that the lady and my mother-in-law had been pursuing the marriage proposal with Barry on their own. This led to a lot of criticism from the people around her, so she is expected to soon be kicked out of her house. And when that happens, she will turn to Barry for help. We could help her or we could ignore her. That would be up to our own judgment. Of course, Barry decided to ignore my mother-in-law. He even told me that if my father-in-law showed any kindness to her and continued to have anything to do with my mother-in-law, he would also cut his ties with my father-in-law. When my father-in-law heard this, he laughed out loud and said,
I don't have that kindness in me. I'm going to hire a lawyer so that I don't have to see her face ever again.
He told Barry.
Barry will continue becoming a fine man, and you will be there for him. I've seen that, and now I'm thinking it might be a good idea to go back to the countryside and live a life of solitude. You are thinking of retreating to the country by yourself? That's not a good idea, Grandpa.
Barry smiled at his father, who was a little sad.
I don't see why you two should be in any trouble. You two are getting along just fine, aren't you? Wait, Grandpa?
Barry's father, who seems puzzled by Barry's words, recognized the word Grandpa and looked surprised. I'm actually pregnant. Actually, I was talking to Barry about telling you at Christmas. I'm sorry it took so long to tell you. I bowed my head and laughed. My father-in-law looked as if he was about to burst into tears. He asked Barry if it was really true, and then turned to me and kept saying,
Thank you, thank you.
And he was happy to hear that. In the days since Christmas, my father-in-law had been emotionally drained due to my mother-in-law, so I was so glad to be able to report this to him. After talking a bit with Barry, it seems that sharing this news helped him come out of his exhausted state, and he started sanctioning my mother-in-law in a number of ways. First, in order to rebuild things, he meditated on that time when she was cheating on him, demanded restitution for the use of their savings, and asked me to submit and disclose to my mother-in-law's family her bullying and verbal abuse towards me. As for that, I have given my consent, so I provided my father-in-law with a recording of what she said before my marriage and during this Christmas that I had kept in case. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law's family members became even more critical of her. My mother-in-law, who had nowhere else to turn but her parents' home, began to spend her days under cold stares. Only once did my mother-in-law contact Barry.
I don't consider you my mother anymore. I don't even want you in my life anymore. I'm talking to my lawyer, so any communication with me will have to go through him. I will no longer accept direct contact from you.
He hung up the phone and blocked incoming calls from her. And of course, my in-laws divorced. As for the affair that Barry's mother had when he was a child, my father-in-law was not able to file a claim due to the statute of limitations. But he would also explain why whenever he got asked about the reason for the divorce. My mother-in-law told her own family and friends that she was getting divorced due to a daughter-in-law issue, and that she was a victim in this situation. The truth about my mother-in-law's affairs spread quickly, and she completely lost the trust of the people around her. My mother-in-law, who had always had a lot of pride, had a hard time even finding a job. My father-in-law told her that she would have a very difficult life in the future. My father was aware of the situation at the time. He said to my father-in-law, "You've been working so hard all this time." He frequently invited my father-in-law to go fishing, which was a hobby he started after becoming single. When things had finally settled down, he was relieved, but still very tired. He has recently started to regain his energy. He and my father have become so close that they often drink together as well as go fishing. As for me, I have morning sickness, but my baby is growing well. I am having a comfortable pregnancy with the support of Barry, my father-in-law, and my father, who take care of me every day. I had only found out by my mother-in-law's affair when our engagement was finalized, but I remember the sad look on Barry's face at the time. We would never let that happen to our child, so Barry and I always talk about how we want to raise our child with love and care.